The cardiac monitor screamed as blood sprayed across the emergency room tiles. A 23-year-old construction worker was dying on the table, his chest crushed by fallen steel beams, and every doctor in Mercy Heights Hospital was either frozen in panic or barking useless orders into the chaos. That's when Sarah Reeves, a nobody night shift nurse who everyone treated like furniture, shoved past a surgeon twice her size, grabbed a scalpel without permission, and cracked the kid's chest open with her bare hands before anyone could stop her. The room went silent. The heartbeat came back. And standing in the hallway, a 4-star general dropped his coffee cup because he recognized the faded scar pattern on her wrist, a mark that only belonged to soldiers who died 4 years ago in classified firefights that never made the news. If you want to see how a woman everyone underestimated brought down an empire built on lies, stick with me until the very end. And drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Sarah Reeves had been invisible for exactly 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. She preferred it that way. Every night she clocked into Mercy Heights Hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, wearing the same tired navy scrubs and pulling her dirty blonde hair into the same messy bun. She kept her head down, spoke only when spoken to, and never, ever drew attention to herself. The other nurses barely knew her name. The doctors didn't bother learning it. To them, she was just another warm body filling shifts nobody else wanted, the kind of worker who restocked supplies and emptied bedpans while real medical professionals saved lives. And that was fine. That was safe. Because the last time Sarah Reeves mattered to anyone, she'd been bleeding out in the wreckage of a downed Black Hawk helicopter while tracer rounds tore through the Afghan night sky. But tonight, the invisible nurse was about to become very, very visible. The emergency department was slammed. Friday nights always were. Drunk drivers, bar fights, domestic violence calls, overdoses. The usual parade of human disaster that kept trauma bays running hot until sunrise. Sarah moved through the chaos like a shadow, handing off IV bags, logging vitals, cleaning up blood nobody else wanted to touch. She was good at being helpful without being noticed. Dr. Marcus Vance, the ER's senior attending, brushed past her without a glance while shouting orders at a terrified resident. I need those labs 5 minutes ago, and if radiology doesn't get me a CT scan in the next 10, I'm going down there myself. Excuse me, Dr. Vance, Sarah said quietly. Bed 7's potassium is critically low. Should I handle it yourself? Vance snapped without turning around. That's what nurses do. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. She'd learned a long time ago that arguing only made things worse. She grabbed the potassium supplement and headed toward bed 7. Weaving between stretchers and crash carts. The nurses' station was packed with staff complaining about the usual hospital politics. Jennifer Torres, one of the day shift charge nurses, was holding court near the coffee maker. I'm telling you, they're cutting our overtime again, Jennifer said loudly. Meanwhile, administration just approved another executive retreat to Scottsdale. It's insulting. A younger nurse named Melissa chimed in. Did you see the email about mandatory training? Like we have time for that. Sarah kept walking. She'd learned not to participate in these conversations. Getting involved meant people remembered you existed, and memory was dangerous. She'd almost made it past when Jennifer's voice cut through the noise. Hey, Sarah, right? You've been here, 3 years? You ever say anything about how they treat us? Sarah paused, her hand on the medication cart. I just do my job. Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it. Yeah, I noticed. You're real good at keeping your head down. Must be nice. Not caring about anything. The other nurses shifted uncomfortably. Sarah felt their eyes on her back. I care, Sarah said quietly. I just don't complain about things I can't change. That's the problem right there, Jennifer shot back. People like you are why nothing ever changes. You just accept whatever scraps they throw at us. Sarah turned slowly. For just a second, something dangerous flickered behind her eyes. Something that made Jennifer take an involuntary step backward. But then Sarah's face went blank again. You're right, Sarah said flatly. I should be more like you. She walked away before Jennifer could respond, but the damage was done. Now people were looking at her, wondering about her. That was exactly what Sarah couldn't afford. She made it to bed 7 and started the potassium drip, trying to disappear back into the background noise of the hospital. The patient, an elderly man with pneumonia, smiled weakly at her. You've got gentle hands, he whispered. My daughter's a nurse too. Army nurse. Stationed in Germany. Sarah's throat tightened. That's nice. You ever think about joining up? They need good people. No, Sarah said quickly, too quickly. I'm not cut out for that. The old man studied her face. You sure? You've got that look? Like you've seen things. Sarah finished hanging the IV bag and forced a smile. Just a long shift. Get some rest. She left before he could ask anything else. The rest of the evening crawled by in tense silence. Sarah could feel Jennifer's eyes on her from across the department, could hear the whispers starting. She'd made a mistake engaging at all. Now she'd have to be extra careful, extra invisible. Around 11 p.m., the trauma bay started filling up. A multi-car accident on the I-10 had sent half a dozen patients their way, and the entire night shift kicked into overdrive. Sarah fell into the rhythm automatically, triaging wounds, starting lines, calling for portable x-rays. This was the part of the job where she could almost forget who she used to be. Almost. Dr. Vance was in rare form, barking orders and treating nurses like servants. He'd been at Mercy Heights for 15 years and acted like he owned the place. Sarah had watched him berate staff until they cried, had seen him throw instruments when things didn't go his way. The hospital administration loved him because he brought in revenue and looked good in fundraising photos. Reeves, he shouted from Trauma Bay 2. Where the hell is my O negative? I called for it 10 minutes ago. Sarah grabbed 2 units from the blood bank runner and brought them over. Right here, doctor. Vance snatched them from her hands without a thank you. Next time, don't make me wait. This isn't a damn coffee shop. Sarah bit her tongue and stepped back. The patient on the table, a teenage girl with a broken femur, was crying softly. Sarah moved to her side and took her hand. You're doing great, Sarah said gently. Just breathe. They're going to fix you up. The girl squeezed her fingers. It hurts so bad. I know, but you're tough. I can tell. Dr. Vance glanced over. Reeves, less talking, more working. Go help Bay 4. Sarah gave the girl's hand one last squeeze and left. She could feel the teenager's scared eyes following her, but there was nothing she could do. In this hospital, nurses were interchangeable parts. Invisible. Bay 4 was worse. A middle-aged man with chest pain, possible M1, and Dr. Vance's least favorite resident, a nervous kid named Kevin Martinez, was struggling to place a central line. I can't get the angle right, Kevin muttered, sweat dripping down his face. Sarah watched his hand shake. You're going too steep. Shallow it out, aim for the clavicle. Kevin adjusted, and the line slid in smoothly. He looked up at her with relief. Thanks. I thought Vance was going to kill me. He might still, Sarah said, but at least you got the line. Kevin managed a weak smile. You're good at this. Why are you just doing night shift? You could probably be a charge nurse easy. Sarah's expression went flat. I like nights. Quieter. Really? Because you seem like you'd be good in trauma situations. Like, really good. You're always so calm. Sarah turned away. Just experience. Where'd you work before here? The question hit like a punch to the gut. Sarah kept her voice steady. Around, different places. She left before Kevin could dig deeper. That's when the ambulance bay doors exploded inward. Paramedics sprinted through, hauling a gurney at full speed, and Sarah's trained eye caught the details instantly. Male, early 20s, construction site accident, traumatic chest injury, massive internal bleeding. The kid's face was gray. His vitals were crashing. Blood soaked through the sheets and dripped onto the floor in thick, dark puddles. We're losing him, one of the paramedics yelled. Flailed chest, possible cardiac tamponade, BP's in the gutter. Sorry. The trauma team swarmed. Nurses shouted. Residents scrambled. Dr. Vance barked orders while pulling on gloves. But Sarah could see it in his eyes. He was rattled. This wasn't a textbook case. This was a nightmare scenario, and the clock was already ticking down. She stayed back, watching from the edge of the room. That was her job. Observe. Assist when asked. Stay out of the way. But her hands were shaking, not from fear, from memory, because she'd seen this exact injury pattern before, in Helmand Province, in field hospitals with no power and no backup. She'd kept men alive with less equipment than this room had in a single drawer. The cardiac monitor flatlined. He's coding! Someone screamed. Dr. Vance started chest compressions, but his technique was sloppy, panicked. He was pushing too hard in the wrong place, risking more rib fractures. The resident fumbled with the intubation kit, dropping the laryngoscope twice. A nurse knocked over a tray of instruments. Everything was falling apart. Sarah's pulse hammered in her ears. Stay invisible. This isn't your fight. You're just a nurse. You're nobody. The kid's lips were turning blue. Dr. Vance was sweating, his compressions losing rhythm. Somebody get me a thoracotomy tray now. But nobody moved fast enough. Jennifer was frozen near the door. Kevin looked like he might pass out. The team was drowning in their own fear, and the patient was seconds from brain death. Sarah counted in her head. 15 seconds without effective circulation. Brain damage started at 4 minutes. They were wasting time. Doctor, you need to... Sarah started. Shut up, Reeves, Vance snapped. Get out of my trauma bay. 20 seconds. The kid's pupils were starting to dilate. Sarah's feet moved before her brain could stop them. She crossed the room in 3 strides, shoved past Kevin, and grabbed the scalpel off the instrument tray. What the hell are you doing? Dr. Vance shouted, his face turning purple. Security! Get her out of here! Sarah didn't answer. She ripped open the patient's gown, poured iodine across his chest in one smooth motion, and made a brutal lateral incision between the 4th and 5th ribs. Fast, deep, precise. Blood welled up instantly, but her hands didn't shake. She'd done this procedure in the back of moving helicopters while taking enemy fire. Someone gasped behind her. Dr. Vance grabbed her shoulder. You're done. You're fired. I'm calling the up. Sarah shrugged him off without looking up. She spread the ribs with a retractor, reached into the chest cavity, and found the pericardium swollen with trapped blood. Exactly what she'd suspected. The heart was being crushed by the pressure. The entire room went silent. She cut the pericardial membrane open in one clean slice. Blood gushed out, releasing the compression. Then she placed her hand directly on the cardiac muscle and began manual compressions, firm, rhythmic, controlled. She could feel the heart struggling beneath her fingers. Come on, she whispered. Come on, kid. You don't get to die tonight. The heart twitched. Then it beat. Then it roared back to life. The monitor beeped. Once, twice, a steady rhythm that built into a strong, regular pulse. Sarah pulled her hand out slowly, checked for active bleeding sources, sutured 2 small vessels with movements so fast they were almost invisible, then stepped back from the table. Her scrubs were soaked in blood. Her face was expressionless. She didn't look at anyone. Dr. Vance stared at her like she'd just materialized out of thin air. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Jennifer was pale, one hand pressed to her chest. Kevin looked like he'd just witnessed a miracle. The patient's vitals stabilized. Color started returning to his face. He was going to live. Who the hell are you? Vance finally whispered. Sarah peeled off her gloves and dropped them in the biohazard bin. Her voice was flat, cold, empty. Nobody important, doctor. She turned and walked out of the trauma bay before anyone could stop her. The hallway felt too bright, too loud. Her ears were ringing. Her hands were starting to shake now that the adrenaline was wearing off. She'd just blown 3 years of careful invisibility in under 2 minutes. She made it to the staff bathroom and locked herself inside. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Sarah gripped the edge of the sink and stared at her reflection. Blood speckled her face. Her eyes looked hollow, haunted. She turned on the faucet and scrubbed her hands, harder than necessary, hot water turning her skin red. This was bad. This was really bad. She'd stood out. She'd shown skill way beyond a basic floor nurse. People would ask questions now. They'd start digging. And if they dug deep enough, they might find the truth. That Sarah Reeves wasn't supposed to exist. That Captain Sarah Reeves had died 4 years ago in a helicopter crash that was ruled mechanical failure, but was actually a missile strike. That she'd survived only because she'd been thrown clear of the wreckage before it exploded. That she'd walked 17 miles through hostile territory with 2 broken ribs and a concussion to reach an outpost. That when she'd finally made contact with command, she'd been told in no uncertain terms that her mission never happened, her team never existed, and if she wanted to stay alive, she needed to disappear. So she had. She'd buried Sarah Reeves and become a nobody, a ghost, just another face in the crowd. Until tonight. Sarah dried her hands and stared at her reflection one more time. Maybe it would be okay. Maybe everyone would just chalk it up to luck or adrenaline. Maybe she could fade back into the background. She was still trying to convince herself when she opened the bathroom door and stopped cold. Standing in the hallway, perfectly still, was a man in a crisp army uniform with 4 silver stars on his shoulders. Brigadier General Richard Carver. Sarah recognized him from news photos. He was some kind of big deal in Army Medical Command, doing a publicity tour of civilian hospitals to promote military-civilian healthcare partnerships. He was supposed to be shaking hands and posing for pictures. Instead, he was staring at Sarah like he'd seen a ghost. His eyes were locked on her left wrist, where her glove had ripped during the procedure. The faded burn scar was visible, a distinctive pattern that curved just below her palm. It wasn't random. It was a field identifier, deliberately burned into the skin of combat medics operating in black site missions where dog tags could get you killed and dental records could be traced. Carver's face went white. "Reeves," he said quietly. "Captain Sarah Reeves, 10th Special Operations Medical Unit." The world tilted sideways. Nobody had called her that name in 4 years. Sarah forced her face to stay neutral. "You're mistaken, General. My name is Sarah Morrison. I'm just a nurse." Morrison was the fake identity she'd been living under. Clean background, legitimate nursing license, nothing that would raise flags. No." Carver stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I was at your memorial service. I watched them fold your flag. You died in the Korengal Valley when your medevac went down. I personally signed the letter to your family." Sarah's throat tightened. She'd never known her family got a letter. She'd disappeared so completely she didn't even know if they'd been told. "You have me confused with someone else," she said, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her chest. Carver's eyes swept over her, taking in every detail. The scar tissue on her hands that no civilian nurse would have. The way she held herself like a coiled spring ready to explode. The cold calculation in her eyes that came from too many life-or-death decisions. "I don't forget faces, Captain, especially not ones I've eulogized." He paused. "What the hell happened over there?" Before Sarah could answer, the hospital's PA system crackled to life. "Code Silver! All personnel, Code Silver. This is not a drill." The lights flickered. Security breach. Carver's hand went to his sidearm on instinct. Sarah's spine went rigid, every muscle in her body tensing. Code Silver meant an active threat. Armed intruder. Lockdown protocol. Down the hallway, confused staff members were looking around. A security guard jogged past, speaking urgently into his radio, and then the elevator at the far end of the corridor opened. 6 men stepped out. They were dressed in black tactical gear, not police SWAT, not hospital security. Private military contractors. Sarah recognized the setup immediately. Custom body armor, suppressed weapons, encrypted communication devices. This was a kill team, and every single one of them was staring directly at Sarah. The lead operator raised his wrist to his mouth, speaking into a radio. "Target confirmed. Initiating containment protocol." Sarah's blood turned to ice because she recognized the voice. It belonged to Derek Mitchell, a former Delta Force operator who'd gone private 5 years ago. The same Derek Mitchell who'd been part of the security detail on her last mission. The same man who'd been in the operations center when her helicopter went down. The same man who'd looked her in the eyes 3 days before the crash and told her, "If you ever talk about what you saw, I'll make sure you disappear so completely even your bones won't be found." She'd thought he'd been joking. He hadn't been. Carver's hand moved toward his weapon, but Sarah grabbed his wrist hard. "Don't. You'll get everyone on this floor killed." "Who are they?" "Ghosts," Sarah said quietly. "The same ones who killed my team." The operator started moving down the hallway in a standard tactical formation. 2x2 coverage, clean sight lines, no wasted movement. They were good. Professional. And they weren't here to take prisoners. Civilians scattered. A nurse screamed. Someone hit the fire alarm, and the shrill sound echoed through the corridor. Jennifer appeared from around the corner, took one look at the armed men, and bolted back the way she'd come. Carver stepped in front of Sarah, his hand finally drawing his sidearm. "I'm not letting them—" "General," Sarah's voice was knife-sharp. "With all due respect, you need to get these people out of here, right now. Call base command. Get actual soldiers here, but do not engage these men." "What about you?" Sarah's eyes went flat and cold, the same look she'd had in the trauma bay, but worse, emptier. "I've been dead for 4 years, General. What's one more day?" She turned and started walking toward the operators. Carver shouted after her, "Captain, that's an order. stand down. But Sarah didn't stop. She'd spent 4 years following orders that got her teammates killed. 4 years hiding while the people responsible walked free. 4 years being invisible. She was done with orders. She was done hiding. The lead operator, Mitchell, raised his weapon as she approached. The suppressor on his rifle was military grade, the kind that would make killing her quiet and clean. On your knees, Captain. Sarah stopped 10 feet away from him. Her hands were empty. Her scrubs were still wet with blood from the surgery. She looked small, defenseless, harmless, but her voice was steady as stone. You should have stayed in the shadows, Mitchell. The operator's eyes narrowed behind his helmet. You don't get to say my name. Why not? Sarah took one deliberate step forward. You said mine plenty of times, right before you radioed the coordinates for the missile strike that took out my helicopter. A muscle twitched in Mitchell's jaw. His finger moved closer to the trigger. Behind Sarah, she could hear Carver shouting into his phone, calling for backup. Could hear the sounds of hospital staff evacuating. Could hear her own heartbeat, steady and slow. She'd been ready for this moment for 4 years. You were supposed to die in that crash, Mitchell said quietly. Command said nobody survived. Command lied, Sarah replied. They're good at that. Then we'll fix their mistake. Mitchell's fingers started to squeeze the trigger, and somewhere deep in the building, alarms began to scream. Because what Mitchell didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Sarah Reeves hadn't spent 4 years just hiding. She'd spent 4 years preparing, learning, planning, waiting for the moment when her past came looking for her. And when it did, she'd be ready. The hospital's backup generators kicked in, and half the building plunged into darkness as the main power grid failed. Emergency lighting bathed the hallway in red. Sarah smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not a scared smile. A combat smile. The kind of smile that came right before violence. You have no idea what you just walked into, she said softly. Mitchell's radio crackled. Another voice, urgent. Ops lead, we have a problem. Building security is locked down. Exits are sealed. We're static, then screaming. Mitchell's head snapped to the side. Report. What's happening? More static. Then a wet, choking sound. Then nothing. Sarah tilted her head. That would be the auxiliary security team I've been quietly training for the last 6 months. Ex-military. All of them. They've been waiting for someone to come after me. Mitchell's eyes widened. You're bluffing. Am I? The lights went out completely. And in the darkness, Sarah Reeves stopped being a nurse. She became a soldier again. The first thing Sarah did was drop to the floor, moving on pure muscle memory. She heard the suppressed cough of Mitchell's rifle firing where her head had been a second earlier, heard the bullet punch into the drywall behind her. Then she moved. In the pitch black, her hands found Mitchell's ankle and yanked hard. He went down with a grunt, and Sarah was already rolling away, putting distance between herself and the kill zone. The other operators opened fire, muzzle flashes lighting up the hallway and strobing bursts. But Sarah wasn't there anymore. She'd spent 3 years walking these hallways every night. She knew every corner, every supply closet, every maintenance access point. In the dark, this was her territory. She heard Mitchell shouting, "Night vision, get your NVGs on!" Too slow. Sarah had already disappeared into a side corridor, moving fast and silent. Her mind was calculating angles, counting operators, planning 3 moves ahead. This was what she'd been trained for, what she'd done in Kandahar and Helmand, and a dozen other places that didn't have names on maps. Behind her, she heard boots pounding, radio chatter. The operators were good, but they were hunting blind while she had home field advantage. She ducked into a maintenance closet and grabbed what she needed, a fire extinguisher, a heavy flashlight, and a pry bar. Not much, but enough. Footsteps approaching. Sarah waited until they were close, then kicked the door open and sprayed the fire extinguisher directly into the first operator's face. He stumbled back, choking, and Sarah swung the pry bar in a tight arc that connected with his knee. Bone cracked. He went down screaming. She grabbed his rifle before it hit the ground, checked the magazine, and kept moving. Now she was armed. Mitchell's voice echoed through the darkness. "She's got Hansen's weapon. Box her in. Alpha team, North Corridor, Bravo, circle around." Sarah smiled grimly. They were thinking like soldiers, clean formations, coordinated movement, overwhelming force. But she wasn't fighting like a soldier. She was fighting like someone with absolutely nothing left to lose. She dropped the rifle, too identifiable, too easy to track by sound, and kept the pry bar. Then she climbed. The ceiling tiles in Mercy Heights were old, flimsy, designed for easy access to the ductwork. Sarah pushed one aside and hauled herself up into the cramped space above the hallway. Dust choked her lungs, but she moved silently across the metal framework, listening to the operators below. Where'd she go? Check the rooms. Mitchell, we're getting nothing on thermal. She's a ghost. Sarah crawled forward until she was directly above them. Through a gap in the tiles, she could see 3 operators moving in formation. Professional. Careful. She waited until they passed beneath her, then dropped straight down onto the last man's shoulders. Her weight drove him to the ground. Before the others could react, Sarah had his sidearm out of its holster and fired 2 rounds into the fluorescent lights overhead, plunging the hallway back into complete darkness. The operator spun, firing wild. Sarah was already gone, rolling into an open patient room and slamming the door. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, from the sheer overwhelming rush of being back in combat after 4 years of forced stillness. She'd forgotten what this felt like. She'd forgotten how much she missed it, and that terrified her more than the men trying to kill her. Outside, Mitchell was regrouping. Forget the quiet approach. Smoke her out. Grenades. Sarah's stomach dropped. Grenades meant they were done trying to make this look clean. They were going to bring the whole hospital down if they had to. She had to move. Now. She burst out of the patient room and sprinted down the hallway toward the central stairwell. Behind her, she heard the metallic clink of a flashbang hitting the floor. She dove through the stairwell door just as the grenade went off, the concussive blast rattling her teeth even through the walls. Sarah took the stairs 3 at a time, heading up instead of down. They'd expect her to run for an exit, so she'd do the opposite. She made it to the 4th floor, the surgical wing, and stopped to catch her breath. Her lungs were burning, her hands were cut from broken glass, but she was alive. For now. Her radio crackled. Wait, she didn't have a radio. Then she realized the sound was coming from the operator's sidearm she'd taken. It had a small receiver clipped to it. Mitchell's voice came through, cold and professional. Captain Reeves, I know you can hear me. This doesn't have to end with everyone in this hospital dying. Just you. Come out. Make it quick. Clean. Sarah grabbed the receiver. You know what's funny, Mitchell? I actually believed the lie. I thought my team died because of bad luck. Mechanical failure. Wrong place, wrong time. Silence. Then Mitchell's voice, quieter. What changed your mind? I started digging. Found the maintenance logs for that helicopter. Found the radio intercepts from that night. Found the bank transfers to your account 3 days after the crash. Sarah's voice went cold. You sold us out. All of us. For what? $500,000? $2 million, Mitchell corrected. And it wasn't about the money. It was about cleaning up a mess. What mess? Your team saw something you weren't supposed to see. A supply convoy. Wrong markings. Wrong manifests. You started asking questions. Sarah's blood ran cold because she remembered now. The week before the crash, her unit had treated casualties from a firefight near a supply depot. One of the wounded soldiers had been delirious, rambling about weapons shipments that didn't match official records. She'd reported it up the chain. And then her helicopter had fallen out of the sky. You killed 12 people to cover up gun running? Sarah whispered. I killed 12 people to protect a multi-billion-dollar operation, Mitchell said. And I'm about to kill you for the same reason. Last chance, Captain. Walk out. Make it easy. Sarah looked down at the gun in her hand. She could end this. Turn herself in. Maybe Mitchell would keep his word and spare the hospital staff. Or maybe he'd kill everyone anyway, just to be sure. She made her decision. Come get me, you piece of shit. She threw the receiver down the hallway and ran. The surgical wing was a maze of operating theaters and recovery rooms, all empty at this hour except for the skeleton crew on night shift. Sarah's footsteps echoed on the polished floors as she ran, the stolen pistol heavy in her hand. She could hear Mitchell's team regrouping below, their boots pounding up the stairwell she'd just left. She ducked into an empty OR and locked the door behind her. The room smelled like antiseptic and latex. Surgical lights hung dark overhead. For a moment, surrounded by the tools of saving lives, Sarah felt the weight of what she'd become. 4 years ago, she'd taken an oath. Do no harm. Tonight, she'd already put one man in the hospital with a shattered knee, and she wasn't done yet. Her hands found a surgical tray and started selecting instruments on autopilot. Scalpels, hemostats, a bone saw. Not weapons, but they'd do in a pinch. She stuffed them into her pockets, feeling like a darker version of the medic she used to be. The door handle rattled. Sarah moved behind the surgical table and waited. The lock exploded inward as someone fired a breaching round into it. The door swung open and two operators entered, weapons up, scanning the room with mounted flashlights. Sarah was already moving. She flipped the surgical table sideways, using it as a shield, and threw a handful of hemostats at the first operator's face. He flinched, and that half-second of distraction was all she needed. She closed the distance, grabbed his rifle barrel, and twisted hard. The weapon discharged into the ceiling. Sarah drove her knee into his gut, then used his momentum to throw him into his partner. Both men went down in a tangle of limbs and tactical gear. Sarah was out the door before they could recover, but the gunshot had given away her position. She heard Mitchell's voice echoing through the surgical wing. "Fourth floor, OR6. All teams converge." Sarah ran harder, her lungs screaming. She needed to change the game, stop reacting, and start controlling the fight. But how? She was one person against 6 trained killers with unlimited ammunition and no rules of engagement. Think, what did she have that they didn't? Knowledge. She knew this hospital inside and out, and she knew something else. General Carver had called for backup. Real military backup. If she could just stay alive long enough, actual soldiers would arrive, and Mitchell's team would have to either retreat or face a firefight they couldn't win. She just had to survive. The pharmacy was 2 floors down. Sarah hit the stairwell and descended fast, taking the steps 4 at a time. Behind her, she could hear the operators spreading out, cutting off escape routes. She burst through the second-floor door and nearly ran straight into a terrified nurse hiding behind a supply cart. It was Melissa, the younger nurse from earlier. "Oh my God," Melissa gasped. "What's happening? Who are those men?" Sarah grabbed her shoulders. "Listen to me. You need to get everyone you can find into the basement. Lock yourselves in the cafeteria freezer. Don't come out until the army arrives." "The army? Just trust me. Go. Now." Melissa nodded and ran. Sarah kept moving toward the pharmacy. The door was locked, but she still had the pry bar. She wedged it into the frame and wrenched hard. The lock gave with a crack. Inside, rows of medications gleamed under emergency lighting. Sarah's eyes scanned the shelves, looking for anything useful. Sedatives, paralytic agents, chemical restraints, and there, in the controlled substances cabinet, exactly what she needed. She smashed the glass and grabbed 3 vials of fentanyl, the concentrated kind used for surgery, enough to drop a grown man in seconds if administered correctly, or if weaponized. Sarah's medic training kicked in as she worked. She found syringes, drew up the medication, then rigged them to small, spring-loaded mechanisms she cannibalized from IV pumps. Crude, but effective. Anyone who stepped on one would get a dose straight through their boot. She scattered 6 of them in the hallway outside the pharmacy, covering them with papers and debris. Then she waited. Footsteps approached. 2 operators moving cautiously. The first one stepped directly on a syringe. He made it 3 steps before his legs gave out. The second operator spun around just as his partner collapsed, and Sarah was already moving. She came out of the pharmacy low and fast, driving her shoulder into his midsection. They went down together, struggling for control of his weapon. Sarah got her hand on the pistol grip and twisted viciously. His finger was still on the trigger when it fired, the bullet punching through his own thigh. He screamed. Sarah didn't hesitate. She grabbed his weapon and ran. 2 down. 4 to go. But her hands were shaking now, and not from adrenaline. From something else. Something darker. She'd just used medicine, the thing she'd dedicated her life to, as a weapon. The line between healer and killer was getting blurrier by the minute. Sarah pushed the thought away and kept moving. She could process the moral implications later. Right now, survival was all that mattered. She made it back to the main corridor and froze. Standing at the far end, illuminated by red emergency lighting, was Mitchell. Just Mitchell. No team, no backup. He ditched his helmet and Sarah could see his face clearly for the first time in 4 years. He looked older, harder. The kind of hard that came from doing terrible things and learning to live with it. Hell of a fight you're putting up, Captain, he called out. I'm almost impressed. Sarah raised the stolen rifle. Almost? You took out 4 of my men. That's better than I expected from someone who's been playing nurse for 4 years. Mitchell took a step forward, his own weapon lowered but ready. But you're not a soldier anymore. You've gone soft. Soft enough to put Hansen and Rodriguez in the ICU. Lucky shots. Try me. Mitchell smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You know what your problem is, Reeves? You still think you're the good guy. You still think there's some moral high ground you can stand on. And you don't? I know the truth. We're all just doing what we're told, following orders. You followed orders in Kandahar, and your team died. I followed orders from people higher up the chain, and I got paid. The only difference between us is I stopped pretending it mattered. Sarah's grip tightened on the rifle. My team died because you sold us out. Your team died because they saw something that threatened a very lucrative operation. I was told to clean up the mess. I cleaned it up. Mitchell shrugged. If it makes you feel better, I didn't enjoy it. It was just business. Business. Sarah's voice was ice. You killed 12 people for business. I've killed a lot more than 12, Captain. So have you. Don't act like you're innocent. And that's what made Sarah's blood run cold. Because he wasn't wrong. She'd killed in combat. She'd made decisions that ended lives. She'd prioritized some patients over others, knowing the one she didn't treat would die. Every medic carried those ghosts. But there was a difference between battlefield necessity and cold-blooded murder for profit. I killed to save lives, Sarah said quietly. You killed to protect gun runners. You killed because someone told you to. Same as me. Mitchell took another step closer. The people we worked for weren't interested in saving lives, Reeves. They were interested in maintaining American interests in a hostile region. And sometimes that meant moving weapons to people who could help us, even if it looked bad on paper. You're talking about arming insurgents. I'm talking about geopolitics, but you wouldn't understand that. You were just a medic. You kept soldiers alive. I kept operations running. Sarah felt sick. Who ordered the hit on my team? Mitchell's smile widened. Does it matter? They're insulated, protected. Even if you somehow survived tonight and went public, they'd bury you in classified red tape so deep you'd never see daylight again. Try me. I already am. Mitchell raised his weapon in one smooth motion. Sarah was faster. She fired first, 3 rounds center mass, exactly as she'd been trained. Mitchell staggered backward, his body armor catching the bullets. He went down on one knee, gasping for breath, but he wasn't dead. And Sarah's rifle clicked empty. She'd miscounted the magazine. Mitchell looked up at her, wheezing, and started laughing. See? Soft. A soldier would have put one in my head to make sure. Sarah dropped the empty rifle and pulled the pistol from her waistband. Mitchell was still laughing when she aimed at his face. But she didn't pull the trigger. Not because she was soft, because she heard something. Helicopters. The sound was distant but unmistakable, the heavy thump of military rotors cutting through the night air. Carver's backup had arrived. Mitchell heard it too. His laughter died. You called the army. I didn't have to. Your attack triggered every security protocol in the building. The general made the call before your team even reached the second floor. Mitchell's face went pale. You planned this. No, I survived this. Sarah kept the gun steady. You're done, Mitchell. Your team is down. The building is surrounded. Whatever operation you're protecting, it's about to become very public. For the first time, Mitchell looked genuinely afraid. You don't understand what you're doing. The people behind this, they'll kill everyone you've ever known to keep it quiet. Then I'll make sure the evidence goes public first. What evidence? You've been hiding for 4 years. You don't have anything. Sarah's smile was cold and sharp. You really think I spent 4 years doing nothing? I've been collecting bank records, radio intercepts, supply manifests, witness statements from soldiers who survived other accidents like mine. It's all backed up in 3 different locations, set to automatically release if I don't check in every 48 hours. Mitchell's eyes widened. You're bluffing. Am I? Sarah tilted her head. Your people taught me operational security, Mitchell. They taught me how to stay alive in hostile territory. They just didn't expect me to use those skills against them. The helicopter sounds were getting louder. Mitchell's hand moved toward his sidearm. Sarah shot him in the shoulder before he could draw. He screamed and fell backward, clutching the wound. Blood poured between his fingers. Sarah walked over and kicked his weapon away. Then she knelt beside him, her face expressionless. "Here's what's going to happen," she said quietly. "You're going to live. I'm going to make sure of that, because you're going to testify. You're going to name every single person involved in this operation, and if you don't, the evidence I've collected will destroy everyone anyway." Mitchell was gasping, his face gray with shock. "They'll kill me." "Probably, but at least you'll die knowing you didn't get away with it." Sarah stood up and walked away, leaving him bleeding on the floor. She made it to the main lobby just as the front doors burst open. Army Rangers poured in, weapons drawn, moving with the kind of precision that made Mitchell's team look like amateurs. They swept the building in minutes, securing each floor, evacuating staff, taking Mitchell's remaining operators into custody. General Carver was right behind them, his uniform crisp despite the chaos. He found Sarah sitting on a bench near the admissions desk, still covered in blood, still holding the pistol loosely in her hand. "Captain Reeves," he said quietly. Sarah looked up at him with exhausted eyes. "General, you want to tell me what the hell just happened in my hospital tour?" "Your hospital tour?" Despite everything, Sarah almost smiled. "Sir, with respect, this stopped being your hospital tour the moment Mitchell's team walked in." Carver sat down beside her. "I called this in as a terrorist attack on a civilian facility. I've got half of Fort Bragg mobilizing. The FBI is inbound. And I've got a dead nurse who's apparently a decorated combat medic that everyone thinks died 4 years ago." He paused. "I need answers, Captain." Sarah set the pistol down carefully. "I don't know what I can tell you, sir." "Start with the truth." "The truth is classified above your pay grade." Carver's eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me? My team's last mission was Black Site. Need to know only. When we got hit, someone decided it was easier to bury us than explain what we were doing." Sarah's voice was flat, emotionless. "I survived, barely. When I made contact with command, I was told to disappear or disappear permanently. I chose the first option." "Who gave that order?" "I don't know, and even if I did, you don't have the clearance to hear it." Carver's jaw tightened. "Captain, I'm a general officer in the United States Army. I think I have the clearance." "You'd think that, wouldn't you?" Sarah looked at him with hollow eyes. "But you don't, because the people who ordered my team killed operate in places that don't officially exist. They move money that doesn't show up in budgets. They make decisions that never get written down." "That's conspiracy talk." "It's reality, sir. And in about 30 minutes, when someone from DOD shows up and tells you to classify this entire incident and forget you ever saw me, you'll understand exactly what I mean." Carver opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Because somewhere outside, another helicopter was landing. Not Army, not marked. Sarah recognized the sound. A corporate bird, the kind used by defense contractors and intelligence agencies that technically didn't exist. "There they are," she said quietly. "Right on schedule." 3 men in dark suits walked through the front doors. They didn't show badges, didn't introduce themselves, just walked straight up to General Carver like they owned the place. The lead suit looked at Sarah, then at Carver. "General, I'm going to need you to release this woman into our custody immediately." Carver stood up, putting himself between Sarah and the suits. "On whose authority?" "That's classified." "Then you're not taking her anywhere." The suit's expression didn't change. "General Carver, I'm trying to be polite. Don't make this difficult." "You want difficult? I've got 50 armed Rangers in this building who answer to me. You've got a nice suit and an attitude problem. I like my odds." The suit pulled out a phone and made a call. 30 seconds later, Carver's own phone rang. He answered it, his face going from confident to pale in the span of a single conversation. When he hung up, his hands were shaking. "What did they say?" Sarah asked, even though she already knew. "They said if I don't comply, my career ends tonight and I spend the next 20 years in Leavenworth for interfering with the national security operation." Carver looked at her. "I'm sorry, Captain." Sarah stood up slowly. "It's okay, sir. I expected this. I can't just let them take you. You don't have a choice." The suits moved in. One of them grabbed Sarah's arm. She didn't resist. As they led her toward the door, she looked back at Carver one last time. "General, do me a favor. Check on the patients from tonight. The construction worker with the chest trauma. Make sure he's okay." Carver nodded, his jaw tight. Sarah was almost out the door when Jennifer appeared from one of the hallways, her eyes wide. Sarah? What's happening? Who are these people? The suit holding Sarah's arm didn't even look at Jennifer. Ma'am, step back. No, she's my coworker. You can't just... She's not your coworker, the suit said flatly. She's nobody. And if you're smart, you'll forget you ever saw her. Jennifer looked at Sarah, confused and scared. I don't understand. Sarah met her eyes. I'm sorry I wasn't more like you, Jennifer. I'm sorry I kept my head down. Then they pulled her outside into the cold Phoenix night. A black SUV was waiting. They pushed her into the back seat, one suit on either side, the third driving. Nobody spoke. The vehicle pulled away from Mercy Heights Hospital, leaving behind the flashing lights and chaos. Sarah stared out the window, watching the building disappear. She'd saved a life tonight. The construction worker would live, but she'd also revealed herself, ended 4 years of careful hiding, and now she was in the hands of the same people who'd tried to kill her the first time. The SUV drove for 20 minutes before pulling into an underground parking garage. They took her to an elevator, then up to the 15th floor of an unmarked office building. The room they put her in was sterile, white walls, metal table, 2 chairs, an interrogation room. Sarah sat down and waited. She didn't have to wait long. The man who walked in wore an expensive suit and had the kind of face you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting him. Average height, average build, completely unremarkable, except for his eyes. His eyes were cold and calculating and completely devoid of empathy. Captain Reeves, he said pleasantly, sitting down across from her. It's been a long time. Sarah said nothing. You've caused quite a bit of trouble tonight. 4 contractors in the hospital. One of them, Mitchell, is singing like a canary to avoid federal charges. Very messy. Good. The man smiled. You think Mitchell's testimony matters? He's a hired gun, a mercenary. Nobody will believe anything he says, especially once we leak his very extensive criminal record. What about my evidence? What evidence? The man spread his hands. We've already accessed your storage locations, cloud accounts, safety deposit boxes, all of it, thoroughly deleted. Sarah's heart sank, but she kept her face neutral. You're lying. Am I? Let's see. The man pulled out a tablet and started reading. Bank of Arizona Box 247. Deleted. Gmail account under the name Rebecca Walsh. Deleted. Encrypted drive hidden in your apartment's air vent. Deleted. He looked up. Did I miss anything? Sarah's mouth went dry. He'd found everything. Here's what's going to happen, the man continued. You're going to disappear. Again. But this time you won't get to choose how. We're going to relocate you somewhere very remote, very isolated, and you're going to spend the rest of your life there, under supervision, making sure you never speak about any of this again. And if I refuse? The man's smile widened. Then you'll have an unfortunate accident, something tragic, maybe a car crash, maybe a home invasion gone wrong. Either way, Captain Sarah Reeves will finally, officially be dead. Sarah stared at him across the table. 4 years of running, 4 years of hiding, 4 years of collecting evidence, all of it for nothing. I want to know one thing, she said quietly. What's that? Why? Why kill 12 people? What was worth it? The man leaned back in his chair. Do you know how much money moves through the Middle East every year? Billions. And most of it is untraceable. Your team stumbled onto a supply route that was generating revenue for very important people. People who fund operations that keep America safe. We couldn't have some medics with a conscience screwing that up. So you killed them. We protected national interests. That's what we do. The man stood up. Now, you have a choice to make. Disappear quietly or disappear permanently. Either way, by sunrise, Sarah Reeves stops existing. He walked to the door. Sarah called after him. I lied. He paused, his hand on the handle. About what? About the evidence. You found my backup locations, but you didn't find my insurance policy. The man turned slowly. Explain. Sarah smiled. It was the same cold combat smile she'd given Mitchell earlier. Before I went underground 4 years ago, I copied everything to a dead man's switch, encrypted, distributed. If I don't check in every 48 hours, it automatically sends everything to every major news outlet in the country. You found my personal backups. You didn't find the one I set up through third-party servers in countries that don't extradite. The man's face went very still. You're bluffing. Maybe. But are you willing to bet your entire operation on that? For the first time, the man looked uncertain. Sarah pressed her advantage. Here's my counteroffer. You let me walk out of here, tonight, and I'll keep your secrets. I'll disappear again, for real this time. But I get to choose where. And I get to live my life without looking over my shoulder. And if we refuse, then in 48 hours, the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, and about 50 other outlets get a very interesting package, complete with names, dates, bank transfers, and testimony from Mitchell. The man's jaw tightened. Mitchell's testimony is worthless. But the bank records aren't, and the supply manifests aren't, and the radio intercepts aren't. Sarah leaned forward. You can kill me, but you can't stop the truth from coming out. Not anymore. The room went silent. The man pulled out his phone and made a call. He spoke in low tones for several minutes, then hung up. When he looked at Sarah again, his expression was unreadable. You have 24 hours to leave the country. After that, we start looking for you. And if we find you, there won't be a negotiation next time. Sarah stood up. I'll be gone in 12. The man stepped aside, letting her pass. She walked out of the interrogation room, down the hallway, into the elevator. Her hands didn't start shaking until she was outside on the street. She'd won. Somehow, impossibly, she'd won. But the victory felt hollow, because she'd spent 4 years building a life in Phoenix, a quiet, invisible life. And now she was about to lose it all over again. Sarah walked through the empty streets until she found a payphone. She made one call. General Carver answered on the second ring. Captain, I need you to check on something for me, sir. The construction worker from tonight, is he stable? There was a pause. He's in ICU, but he's going to make it. Thanks to you. Sarah closed her eyes. Good. That's good. Where are you? Leaving. I just wanted to make sure he was okay. Captain, wait. Sarah hung up. She had 12 hours to disappear. And she knew exactly where she was going, somewhere far away, somewhere they'd never think to look, somewhere she could finally stop running. But first she had one last thing to do. She walked back to Mercy Heights Hospital. The Rangers were still securing the perimeter, but she knew the back entrances. She slipped inside through the loading dock and made her way to the locker room. Her locker was still there, untouched. Inside was a single photograph. The only thing she'd kept from her old life. Her team. 12 people smiling at the camera, arms around each other, standing in front of a helicopter that would be their tomb 3 days later. Sarah tucked the photo into her pocket. Then she walked out of Mercy Heights Hospital for the last time. The sun was starting to rise over Phoenix, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Sarah Reeves had saved a life tonight. She'd also destroyed the only life she had left. But as she walked away from the hospital, she felt something she hadn't felt in 4 years. Not peace, not safety, but something close. She'd stopped running from the truth. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The street was empty except for one person, a figure standing beside a car, waiting. Sarah's hand went to the pistol she'd kept hidden in her waistband. Then the figure stepped into the light. It was General Carver. Going somewhere, Captain? He asked quietly. Sarah stopped walking. I told you I have to disappear. I know. That's why I'm here. Carver opened the car door. Get in. Sir, I don't... That's an order, Captain. Sarah hesitated, then climbed into the passenger seat. Carver got behind the wheel and started driving. Where are we going? Sarah asked. Somewhere safe. Somewhere they won't look. Carver glanced at her. I made some calls after they took you. Pulled in every favor I had. You were right. Someone very high up ordered me to forget about you. But I don't follow illegal orders, and I don't abandon soldiers. Sarah's throat tightened. You're risking your career for me. I'm doing what's right. There's a difference. Carver turned onto the highway. I've got a contact at State Department. He owes me. He's arranging new identity papers, passport, everything you need to start over. Why would you do this? Carver was quiet for a long moment. Because I read your file, Captain. Your real file. You saved 37 lives in 18 months of combat operations. You ran into burning buildings to pull out wounded. You stayed behind enemy lines to stabilize casualties when your team could have left you behind. You're exactly the kind of soldier this country should be protecting, not burying. Sarah looked out the window, blinking hard. Where are we going? Canada for now. Then wherever you want. Carver handed her an envelope. New identity, bank account with enough money to get started. Phone number for my contact if you need anything. Sarah opened the envelope with shaking hands. The passport had her photo, but a different name. Emma Harrison. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet. You're still on your own after I drop you at the border. Carver's grip tightened on the steering wheel. But I'll make sure those bastards never find you. I promise you that. They drove in silence for an hour. When they reached the border crossing, Carver pulled over. This is as far as I can take you, he said. Sarah climbed out of the car. Then she turned back. Sir, the evidence I mentioned, the dead man's switch. Carver looked at her. It's real, Sarah said. But it's not set to go to news outlets. It's set to go to you. If anything happens to me, you'll get everything. Names, dates, proof. Carver's eyes widened. Captain. Use it how you see fit, sir. Maybe it'll be enough to bring them down. Maybe it won't. But at least someone will know the truth. She started walking toward the border. Captain, Carver called after her. Sarah turned. For what it's worth, Carver said quietly, you're one hell of a soldier, and an even better medic. Don't forget that. Sarah nodded once, then kept walking. She crossed into Canada as the sun climbed higher. Emma Harrison, civilian, nobody important, but somewhere in Phoenix, a construction worker was waking up in ICU, with his life saved by a nurse everyone had underestimated. And somewhere in a classified database, a dead man's switch was counting down. 48 hours. 47 hours and 59 minutes. 47 hours and 58 minutes. The clock was ticking, and the people who'd buried Sarah Reeves once were about to learn that some ghosts don't stay buried. Sarah made it 6 hours into Canada before her phone buzzed, not the burner phone Carver had given her. The old one, the one she should have destroyed the moment she crossed the border. But she hadn't, because part of her knew this wasn't over. The text was from a blocked number. Mitchell's dead. Car accident. Very tragic. You're next. Sarah stared at the screen, her hand steady despite the ice flooding her veins. They'd killed Mitchell to silence him, which meant the suits had decided negotiation was off the table. She was back to being hunted. A second text arrived. Check the news. Sarah pulled up a news site on her phone. The headline made her stomach drop. Terrorist attack foiled at Phoenix Hospital. Army nurse killed during heroic standoff. There was a photo. A body bag being loaded into a coroner's van outside Mercy Heights. They'd staged her death. Sarah scrolled down, reading fast. The article claimed an unnamed nurse had been killed by domestic terrorists during an attempted hospital takeover. General Carver was quoted saying the nurse had sacrificed herself to save patients. The attackers, described as anti-government extremists, had all been neutralized. No mention of Mitchell's team, no mention of classified operations. No mention of gun running or defense contractors. Just a clean story that tied everything up in a bow. And officially, Sarah Reeves was dead. Again. Her phone rang. Same blocked number. She answered, but didn't speak. The voice on the other end was the man from the interrogation room. Congratulations, Captain. You're officially deceased. We even gave you a hero's burial. You should be thanking us. What do you want? I want to make something very clear. You no longer exist. Your deal is void. And if you ever surface again, we won't bother with arrests or interrogations. We'll just erase everyone you've ever spoken to, starting with General Carver. Sarah's grip tightened on the phone. You touch him and... And what? You'll release your evidence? Go ahead. We've already discredited Mitchell. His testimony died with him. And without a living witness, your evidence is just conspiracy theory garbage that no reputable outlet will touch. The man paused. You're a ghost, Captain. Stay that way. The line went dead. Sarah stood in the middle of a gas station parking lot in Saskatchewan, surrounded by empty fields and endless sky, and felt the weight of 4 years crushing down on her all over again. They'd won. She'd fought back, exposed Mitchell, saved lives, and it didn't matter. They'd simply rewritten the story and moved on. And now Carver was in danger because he'd helped her. Sarah looked down at her phone, at the fake passport in her pocket, at the cash Carver had given her. She could run, disappear into Canada or Europe or South America, live out her days as Emma Harrison, working quiet jobs, staying invisible, Or she could go back. The smart play was running, but Sarah was done making the smart play. She turned around and started walking back toward the border. The crossing guard looked surprised to see her returning so soon. "Forget something, ma'am?" "Yeah," Sarah said, "my spine." She drove back to Phoenix in a stolen car, pushing 90 on empty highways while her mind raced through scenarios. The suits had made a critical mistake when they threatened Carver. They'd shown their hand, revealed that they were scared enough to tie up loose ends aggressively, which meant Sarah's dead man's switch actually worried them, which meant it was more valuable than she'd thought. She reached Phoenix just after midnight and ditched the car in a residential neighborhood. Then she called Carver from a payphone. He answered on the first ring, his voice tight. "I told you not to contact me. They're watching." "I know. That's why I'm calling. How much heat are you taking?" Carver was quiet for a moment. "DOD opened an investigation into my conduct during the hospital incident. They're calling it unauthorized use of military assets. I've been suspended pending review." "They're setting you up." "I know." Carver's voice was grim. "But there's not much I can do about it. My lawyer says unless I have concrete evidence of wrongdoing by the people investigating me, I'm finished." Sarah's mind clicked into place. "What if I could get you that evidence?" "Captain, no. You need to stay dead. If they find out you're alive, they already know. They called me 2 hours ago and threatened to kill you if I didn't stay buried." Carver cursed. "Then you definitely need to run." "I'm tired of running, sir." Sarah looked out at the dark Phoenix skyline. "I've been running for 4 years. It hasn't solved anything. They'll keep killing people to protect their operation unless someone stops them. And you think that someone is you? I think I'm the only one left who knows the truth and isn't dead yet." Carver sighed. "What's your plan?" "I need to get inside the building where they took me. There's a server room on the 12th floor. If I can access it, I can pull the communications records that prove the suits have been running illegal operations." "That's insane. The building will be guarded." "I know. That's why I need your help." Sarah gripped the phone tighter. "You still have contacts at Fort Bragg?" "Some." "Why?" "Because I need a distraction, something big enough to pull security away from that building for 20 minutes. There was a long silence. Then Carver said, "You're asking me to commit career suicide." "I'm asking you to help me finish what we started." Another pause. "When?" "Tonight, before they moved the data." Carver laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're out of your mind, Captain." "Probably. Are you in?" "Give me 2 hours. I'll see what I can do." Sarah hung up and started planning. The building was downtown, 15 stories of glass and steel that housed a dozen shell corporations and front companies. Security would be tight, cameras, guards, electronic locks. She'd need to move fast and quiet, and she'd need weapons. Sarah made her way to a pawn shop on the east side that she knew stayed open late and didn't ask questions. 20 minutes later, she walked out with a Glock 19, 2 spare magazines, a tactical knife, and a small pry bar. Not much, but enough. She drove to a location 3 blocks from the Target building and parked. Then she changed in the back seat, dark clothes, boots, gloves. She tied her hair back and checked her gear one last time. Her phone buzzed. Text from Carver. "Distraction in 15 minutes, north side. You'll know it when you see it." Sarah started moving. She approached the building from the south, staying in the shadows, watching the security patterns. 2 guards in the lobby, cameras covering every entrance. Standard corporate setup. Then exactly 15 minutes later, the north side of the building erupted in chaos. Fire alarms screamed. Sprinkler systems activated. People started pouring out of the emergency exits. Sarah didn't know what Carver had done, but it was working. Half the security team rushed toward the north entrance. The lobby guards were distracted, talking urgently into radios. Sarah slipped in through a side door that had been propped open by evacuating workers. The stairwell was empty. She took the stairs 2 at a time, heading up instead of down, counting floors. 12. The server room was on 12. She burst through the stairwell door and found herself in a quiet hallway. Corporate offices, all dark and empty. Good. The server room was at the far end. The door had a keycard lock. Sarah pulled out the pry bar and wedged it into the door frame. The lock was electronic, but the frame was just wood and drywall. She wrenched hard, and the frame splintered. The door swung open. Inside, rows of servers hummed quietly in the climate-controlled room. Sarah pulled out a USB drive, one she'd prepared years ago, loaded with data extraction software. She found the main terminal and plugged it in. The software started running, pulling communications records, financial transfers, personnel files, everything. The download bar crawled across the screen, 5%, 10%. Sarah's nerves were screaming. She was too exposed. Someone would notice the broken door any second. 15%, 20%. Footsteps in the hallway. Sarah drew her pistol and moved behind a server rack. The door opened and a security guard stepped in, flashlight sweeping the room. "Hello? Anyone in here?" Sarah held her breath. The guard's flashlight beam passed inches from her hiding spot. Then his radio crackled. "All units, false alarm on the north side. Faulty sensor, return to stations." The guard muttered something under his breath and left. Sarah exhaled slowly and checked the download. 60%. Come on. Come on. 80%. More footsteps. Multiple people this time. Sarah's stomach dropped. The door burst open and 3 men in suits entered. Not security guards. The same suits from before. The lead man saw the USB drive and smiled coldly. "Captain Reeves, we had a feeling you'd try something stupid." Sarah stepped out from behind the server rack, gun raised. "Stay back." "Or what? You'll shoot us?" The man laughed. "You're in a building full of security. You'll never make it out." "Maybe not, but I'll take you with me." The download hit 95%. The man pulled out his own weapon. "You should have stayed dead, Captain." "Probably." The download hit 100%. Sarah grabbed the USB drive, yanked it free, and bolted. She fired 2 shots over her shoulder, not aiming to kill, just to create space. The suits dove for cover and Sarah was already out the door, sprinting down the hallway. Alarms started blaring. The whole building was going into lockdown. Sarah hit the stairwell and started descending, taking stairs 3 and 4 at a time. Behind her, she could hear boots pounding, voices shouting. She made it to the 3rd floor when the stairwell door below her burst open and security flooded in. Trapped. Sarah reversed direction and went up. 4th floor, 5th. She could hear them closing in from both directions. 6th floor. She burst through the door and found herself in an open office space. Cubicles, conference rooms, windows overlooking the street. Windows. Sarah ran to the nearest one and looked down. 6 stories. Too high to jump. But there was a fire escape on the adjacent building, maybe 10 feet away. The office door crashed open behind her. "Freeze!" Sarah didn't freeze. She grabbed a desk chair, hurled it through the window, and jumped. For one weightless second, she was airborne, 6 stories above the pavement, glass falling around her like deadly rain. Then she hit the fire escape railing hard enough to crack ribs. She gasped, vision blurring from the pain, but forced herself to keep moving. Down the fire escape, down to street level. She hit the ground running, clutching her side, the USB drive still clenched in her fist. Behind her, the building was chaos, security pouring out, sirens approaching. Sarah disappeared into an alley, then another, putting distance between herself and the scene. She made it 3 blocks before her legs gave out. She collapsed against a dumpster, gasping for air, her ribs screaming, definitely broken. At least 2, maybe 3. But she had the data. Sarah pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called Carver. "Did you get it?" he asked immediately. "Yeah, I got it." Sarah coughed and tasted copper. "But I'm hurt. Broken ribs. Maybe internal bleeding." "Where are you?" Sarah looked around trying to get her bearings. "East side, near the warehouse district. I'm 10 minutes out. Stay on the line." Sarah closed her eyes and focused on breathing. In and out, shallow breaths. Don't puncture a lung. Carver's voice kept her conscious. "You did good, Captain. Real good. Just hang on." "They knew I was coming," Sarah said. "They were waiting." "Doesn't matter. You got what we needed." "How did you do it? The distraction?" Carver laughed. "Called in a fake gas leak. Whole city block had to evacuate. I'm going to get so much hell for this." "Sorry." "Don't be. I haven't felt this alive in years." His voice got serious. "Sarah, listen. Once we go public with this data, there's no taking it back. Your life changes. My life changes. Are you ready for that?" Sarah thought about the construction worker at Mercy Heights, about her team that died in the desert, about 4 years of hiding. "Yeah," she said, "I'm ready." Headlights appeared at the end of the alley. Carver's car. Sarah tried to stand and nearly passed out from the pain. Carver jumped out and helped her into the passenger seat. Jesus, you look like hell. Feel worse. He started driving. We need to get you to a hospital. No hospitals. They'll be watching. You're bleeding internally. You need medical attention. Sarah pressed her hand to her side and felt the wetness. He was right. There's a clinic off 7th Street, run by a guy who used to be Army. He won't ask questions. Carver changed direction. Sarah handed him the USB drive. If I don't make it, you'll make it. If I don't, you take this to the press. All of it, every name, every transaction. Carver took the drive and put it in his pocket. You're not dying in my car, Captain. I just got it detailed. Despite the pain, Sarah almost smiled. They made it to the clinic, a rundown building between a laundromat and a tattoo parlor. Carver helped Sarah inside. The doctor was a grizzled man in his 60s with steady hands and a 1,000-yard stare. He took one look at Sarah and pointed to the exam table. Broken ribs, Sarah said. Possible internal bleeding. The doctor started an IV without asking for her name. You in trouble? Always. Good. Keeps life interesting. He pressed on her abdomen and Sarah bit back a scream. Yep, you're bleeding. Need an ultrasound to see how bad. 20 minutes later, the doctor had his answer. You're lucky. Liver laceration, but it's small. Should clot on its own if you don't do anything stupid for the next week. Define stupid, Sarah said. Running, fighting, breathing too hard. The doctor wrapped her ribs. You need to rest. Can't. Didn't think so. He handed her a bottle of pills. Painkillers. Don't take more than 2 at a time unless you want to meet your maker early. Sarah pocketed the pills. Thanks, Doc. Don't thank me. Just try not to die. Bad for my reputation. Back in Carver's car, Sarah swallowed 2 pills dry and leaned back in the seat. Now what? Carver asked. Now we end this. Sarah pulled out her phone and started typing an email. I'm sending the data to every journalist I can think of. Major outlets, independent reporters, bloggers, everyone. They'll try to kill the story. Let them try. Once it's out there, it's out there. Sarah hit send and watched the email queue fill up. 50 recipients, 100, 200. There was no going back now. Carver's phone rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then his face went pale. What? Sarah asked. That was my contact at State. The suit's just issued a federal warrant for your arrest. They're calling you a domestic terrorist. They've frozen all of General Carver's assets and issued a warrant for me, too. Sarah felt the walls closing in. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less. Then we need to go public, now, before they can spin the narrative. Carver pulled over and grabbed his own phone. He started making calls. Journalists he knew, politicians who owed him favors, military contacts who might listen. Sarah did the same. Within 30 minutes, they had 3 news outlets willing to meet. 1 local, 1 national, 1 international. We're meeting them at the same time, Sarah said. Different locations. That way, if one gets shut down, the others still have the story. Smart. They split up. Carver took the national outlet. Sarah took the international. The meeting was in a coffee shop near the airport. Neutral ground, public enough to be safe. The journalist was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a recording device already running. You're Sarah Reeves, she said. Not a question. I am. The government says you're dead. They've been saying that for 4 years. Sarah pulled out a laptop and plugged in the USB drive. I'm about to prove them wrong. She showed the journalist everything. Bank records, communications transcripts, supply manifests, witness statements. The whole operation laid bare. The journalist's eyes got wider with every file. This is massive, she whispered. If this is real, it's real. How do I know you're not just some conspiracy theorist? Sarah pulled up a photo from the USB drive. Her old team. 12 people standing in front of a helicopter. These are the people the government claimed died in a mechanical failure. But here's the maintenance log showing that helicopter was inspected and cleared 2 hours before takeoff. Here's the radio intercept showing a missile lock. Here's the bank transfer to the contractor who fired it. Sarah looked the journalist in the eyes. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, I'm a witness. And I'm tired of being silent. The journalist was already typing, her fingers flying across her keyboard. I need to verify some of this before I can run it. You have 2 hours. After that, they'll shut you down. 2 hours isn't enough. Then work fast. Sarah's phone buzzed. Text from Carver. National outlet is running it. Front page, online now. Sarah showed her screen to the journalist. Looks like verification just arrived. You're either first or you're last. Your choice. The journalist made her decision. Give me 90 minutes. Sarah stood up. You've got 60. She left the coffee shop and climbed into a waiting taxi. Her ribs were screaming and the painkillers were wearing off, but she couldn't stop now. Her phone lit up with notifications. The story was breaking everywhere. Major outlets, social media, international news. The government's denials were already starting, but it was too late. The evidence was out there. The truth was spreading faster than they could contain it. Sarah's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. The man from the interrogation room sounded furious. You just signed your death warrant, Captain. Probably, but I took you down with me. You think this changes anything? We'll discredit you, destroy your credibility, make you look like a delusional... Good luck with that. I've got 12 dead soldiers and $2 million in traceable bank transfers that say otherwise. The line went dead. Sarah leaned back in the taxi seat and closed her eyes. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. The truth was out. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. Breaking. DOD announces full investigation into alleged black site operations and defense contractor misconduct. Sarah read the article. The government was already scrambling to get ahead of the scandal, promising investigations, promising accountability. She'd believe it when she saw it. The taxi dropped her at a motel on the outskirts of Phoenix. Sarah paid cash and checked in under a fake name. Inside the room, she collapsed on the bed and finally let herself feel the pain. Her ribs, her exhaustion, the weight of 4 years. But also something else. Relief. She pulled out the photograph of her team and stared at their faces. I got them, she whispered. I got the bastards who killed you. Her phone rang one more time. General Carver. Turn on the news, he said. Sarah grabbed the remote and flipped to CNN. Her own face stared back at her from the screen. Not the hospital ID photo. A military photo from years ago, in uniform, younger and full of hope. The headline read, Hero or Whistleblower, the nurse who exposed a $1 billion cover-up. The anchor was talking about her team, about the helicopter crash, about the evidence she'd released. Sarah watched in stunned silence as her entire story played out on national television. You did it, Carver said quietly. You actually did it. We did it, Sarah corrected. Yeah, we did. Carver paused. Sarah, they're calling for congressional hearings. The FBI is opening an investigation. People are demanding answers. Good. But you know what this means. You can't hide anymore. You're going to be the most famous person in America by tomorrow morning. Sarah looked at her reflection in the motel mirror, at the woman who'd spent 4 years invisible. I know. Are you ready for that? Before Sarah could answer, her door exploded inward. 3 men in tactical gear burst through, weapons raised. Not government, not military. Private contractors. Mitchell's people had sent one last team. Sarah's hand went for her gun, but she was too slow, too injured, too exhausted. The lead operator put a laser sight on her forehead. End of the line, Captain. The laser sight didn't waver from Sarah's forehead, but the operator's finger hesitated on the trigger. Not for mercy. From the sound of helicopters overhead. The lead operator's radio crackled. Abort! Abort! Federal agents inbound. Repeat. Feds are on site. Through the shattered motel door, Sarah could see strobing blue and red lights flooding the parking lot, car doors slamming, voices shouting orders. The operator lowered his weapon by an inch. You got lucky, Captain. Luck had nothing to do with it, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The 3 contractors backed toward the door, weapons still trained on her. Then they bolted, disappearing into the night like smoke. Sarah didn't move. Couldn't move. Her ribs were screaming and her vision was starting to blur. FBI agents swarmed through the door seconds later, weapons drawn. Sarah Reeves? One of them called out. Yeah, I'm Special Agent Torres. You're under federal protection as of right now. Torres holstered her weapon and spoke into her radio. Subject secured. Send medical. Sarah slumped against the wall, finally letting herself feel the exhaustion. How did you find me? General Carver called us. Said you'd be a target the moment the story broke. Torres looked around the destroyed motel room. He was right. Paramedics arrived and tried to examine Sarah's injuries, but she waved them off. I'm fine. You're bleeding through your shirt, one of them said. Sarah looked down. The paramedic was right. Her makeshift bandages had come loose during the confrontation. Just rewrap it. I need to stay mobile. Ma'am, you need a hospital. What I need is to finish this. Sarah stood up, gritting her teeth against the pain. Where's General Carver? Agent Torres exchanged a glance with her partner. He's at FBI headquarters, giving a full statement. Take me there. Ms. Reeves, you're a material witness in a federal investigation. We need to debrief you, get your full testimony, then do it at headquarters, with Carver present, because I'm not saying another word until I know he's safe. Torres studied her for a moment, then nodded. Fine. But you're riding in our vehicle, and you're getting medical attention on the way. The drive to FBI headquarters took 30 minutes. Sarah sat in the back of an armored SUV while a medic rewrapped her ribs and checked her vitals. The news was playing on every device, every screen they passed. Her face, her story. The scandal spreading like wildfire. When they arrived at headquarters, the building was chaos. Agents rushing between offices, phones ringing off the hook, senior officials huddled in urgent conversations. Torres led Sarah through security and up to the third floor. General Carver was in an interview room, looking exhausted but alive. When he saw Sarah, relief flooded his face. Captain, thank hell. Contractors hit my motel 20 minutes ago, Sarah said, sitting down across from him. 3 operators, FBI scared them off. Carver's jaw tightened. They're getting desperate. Good. Desperate people make mistakes. Agent Torres sat down at the head of the table. We've been getting pressure from DOD to classify this entire investigation, bury it under national security concerns. Are you going to? Sarah asked. Hell no, not after what we've seen in your data. Torres opened a laptop and turned it toward them. We've been analyzing the files you released. The operation was bigger than we thought. It wasn't just illegal weapons transfers. They were running a full black market pipeline, selling American military hardware to foreign buyers, then using the profits to fund off-book operations. Sarah leaned forward, ignoring the pain in her ribs. How high does it go? We're still piecing that together, but we've identified at least 3 current Pentagon officials, half a dozen defense contractors, and multiple shell corporations. Torres pulled up a file. The man who interrogated you, we've got a partial ID, goes by the name James Garrett, former CIA, now works for a private security firm called Vanguard Solutions. Vanguard, Carver repeated. I've heard that name. They have contracts with half the 3-letter agencies. Had contracts, Torres corrected. As of 2 hours ago, the Justice Department froze all of Vanguard's assets and issued warrants for their executive board. Sarah felt a flicker of satisfaction. What about Garrett? Still in the wind, but we've got his financials, his communications, his associates. Torres looked at Sarah. He can't hide forever. A knock on the door interrupted them. Another agent stuck his head in. Torres, you need to see this. Press conference now. They moved to a conference room where a wall of monitors showed live news feeds. Every channel was carrying the same broadcast. A press conference from the Department of Defense. A man in a suit stood at a podium, facing a sea of cameras and reporters. Sarah recognized him immediately. Deputy Secretary of Defense Robert Krantz, one of the names from her files. Ladies and gentlemen, Krantz began, his voice smooth and practiced. In light of recent allegations, the Department of Defense is launching a comprehensive internal review of all contractor oversight procedures. We take these claims very seriously and are committed to full transparency. Liar, Sarah whispered. On screen, a reporter shouted a question. Mr. Secretary, is it true that you personally approved weapons transfers to unvetted foreign buyers? Krantz's smile didn't waver. Absolutely not. These allegations are based on fabricated documents and the testimony of a disturbed individual with a documented history of mental instability. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Another reporter, are you referring to Captain Sarah Reeves? I'm referring to a former service member who was dishonorably discharged after a psychological evaluation deemed her unfit for duty. Krantz pulled out a folder. I have medical records here showing a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder with delusional episodes. This entire story is the product of a conspiracy theory, nothing more. Agent Torres muted the broadcast and turned to Sarah. Is any of that true? No. I was never dishonorably discharged. I was never evaluated. Sarah's voice was shaking with rage. They're manufacturing evidence. Carver stood up. We need to counter this. Now, before it takes hold. With what? Sarah asked. They control the narrative. They have resources we don't. We have the truth. The truth doesn't matter if nobody believes it. Torres unmuted the broadcast. Krantz was still talking, his performance flawless. The department stands behind our contractors and our oversight procedures. We will not be bullied by false accusations from unstable individuals seeking attention. Sarah watched the man who'd helped orchestrate the murder of her team stand there and lie without flinching. And she realized something. He was good at this. Too good. Which meant he'd done it before. Torres, Sarah said slowly, how far back do Vanguard's contracts go? The agent pulled up a database. Looks like they've been operating since 2008. Why? Because if they've been running this operation for that long, my team wasn't the first problem they cleaned up. Sarah's mind was racing. Pull every military incident involving contractors from the last 15 years. Helicopter crashes, training accidents, ambushes, anything that killed soldiers who might have witnessed something they shouldn't. Torres started typing. After a moment, her expression changed. Jesus, there are dozens, maybe more. Cross-reference them with Vanguard's deployment locations. More typing. Torres's face went pale. 80% overlap. These incidents always happened within 100 miles of a Vanguard operation. Carver leaned over her shoulder, reading the screen. They've been doing this for years, killing anyone who got too close. And getting away with it, Sarah said. Until now. Torres grabbed her phone. I need to brief my director. This just became a lot bigger than illegal arms sales. While Torres stepped out to make calls, Sarah watched the press conference continue. Krantz was taking questions, deflecting with practiced ease. He looked untouchable. But Sarah had learned something in 4 years of hiding. Untouchable men had the furthest to fall. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Saw the press conference. Want to help destroy that lying bastard? Meet me at the address below. Come alone. Sarah showed the message to Carver. It's a trap, he said immediately. Probably. Then you're not going. Sarah looked at the address. It was a parking garage downtown. Public enough to be relatively safe. What if it's not? What if someone else has information we need? Then they can bring it to the FBI. You know how this works, General. Whistleblowers don't trust the FBI. They trust individuals. Sarah stood up, her ribs protesting. I have to go. Not alone, you don't. They told Torres they were going for coffee. It was a weak excuse, but the FBI agent was too busy coordinating with her superiors to press the issue. Carver drove. Sarah kept her hand on the pistol she'd taken from one of Mitchell's team back at the hospital. The parking garage was 10 minutes away, 3 stories of concrete in the business district. They parked on the second level and waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. This was a waste of time, Carver muttered. Then a figure emerged from behind a concrete pillar. It was a woman in her 50s wearing business casual clothes and carrying a briefcase. She looked terrified. Sarah and Carver got out of the car slowly, hands visible. I'm Sarah Reeves, Sarah said. Who are you? My name is Patricia Morse. I worked for Vanguard Solutions, in accounting. The woman's hands were shaking. I've been watching the news. What you said about illegal operations, about people being killed, it's true. All of it. Why are you coming forward now? Because they fired me this morning, said I was a liability, gave me a severance package and told me if I ever talked about what I saw, I'd end up like Mitchell. Patricia set the briefcase on the ground. I have copies of everything, financial records, wire transfers, communications between Krantz and Vanguard executives, everything you need to prove he's lying. Sarah looked at Carver, then back at Patricia. Why not go to the FBI? Because half the people investigating this are on Vanguard's payroll. I don't know who to trust. Patricia pushed the briefcase toward them. But I saw your interview. what you said about your team, and I thought, maybe you're someone who actually gives a damn. Sarah picked up the briefcase and opened it. Inside were hundreds of pages of documents, USB drives, financial spreadsheets. It was a prosecutor's dream. How did you get all this out? I've been copying files for 6 months. Ever since I started seeing discrepancies in the accounts, money going to operations that didn't exist, payments to people who weren't on any roster. Patricia's voice cracked. I ignored it at first, told myself it wasn't my business, but then I saw the names of soldiers who'd died, and the bonuses paid out right after. And I knew. Knew what? That people were being killed to protect profit margins. Sarah closed the briefcase. Thank you for this. Don't thank me. Just make sure it counts. Patricia turned to leave, then stopped. One more thing. Krantz isn't the top. He's middle management. The real money comes from someone higher. Who? I don't know. But there's a meeting scheduled for tomorrow night, all the major players. The documents have the location. Patricia walked back into the shadows. End this, Captain, please. Back in the car, Sarah and Carver went through the documents. The evidence was damning. Detailed financial records showing millions of dollars moving through shell corporations. Communications proving Krantz had personally authorized the operation that killed Sarah's team. And most importantly, confirmation of Patricia's claim. There was someone above Krantz. The documents referenced someone called the principal, but never used a name. We need to find out who this is, Sarah said. Carver was already on his phone calling Torres. We need to meet, now. We have new evidence. They returned to FBI headquarters and dumped everything on Torres's desk. The agent's eyes got wider with every page. This is enough to arrest half of Washington, she breathed. Then do it, Sarah said. It's not that simple. Some of these people have serious political protection. If we move too fast, they'll bury us in red tape and classified hearings. What about the meeting tomorrow night? Carver asked. If we can catch them all together, we'd need a warrant, surveillance authorization. We'd have to go through channels that might be compromised. Sarah leaned forward. Or we don't go through official channels at all. Torres looked at her sharply. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting I go to that meeting, wearing a wire. Get them on record. That's insane. You'd be walking into a room full of people who want you dead. They already want me dead. At least this way I'd be doing something useful. Carver shook his head. Absolutely not. We're not using you as bait. I'm not asking permission, General. The room went silent. Torres finally spoke. Even if we agreed to this, and I'm not saying we are, we'd need serious backup. Tactical teams in position, real-time monitoring. Can you arrange that without tipping off anyone on Vanguard's payroll? Torres thought for a moment. Maybe. I have some agents I trust, people who aren't connected to any DoD contracts. She looked at Sarah. But if this goes wrong, you could end up dead before we can extract you. I've been dead before. Didn't stick. Carver grabbed Sarah's arm. This is suicide. This is finishing what I started. Sarah met his eyes. My team died because they saw the truth. I'm not letting their deaths be for nothing. The next 24 hours were a blur of preparation. Torres assembled a small team of agents she personally vetted. They rigged Sarah with a wire so small it was nearly undetectable, positioned surveillance teams around the meeting location, a private estate in Scottsdale owned by one of Vanguard's shell companies. Sarah stood in the FBI's tech room while they ran final checks on her equipment. Audio's clear, one of the techs said. Video's working. You're good to go. Torres handed Sarah an earpiece. We'll be monitoring everything. At the first sign of trouble, we're coming in. Define trouble. If they try to kill you. What if they just threaten to kill me? Then try to keep them talking. Torres paused. And Sarah? Don't be a hero. Get the confession and get out. Sarah nodded and headed for the exit. Carver was waiting by the door. I don't like this, he said. I know. If something happens to you, then you make sure those files get to every news outlet in the country. Don't let them bury this. Carver pulled her into a brief, tight hug. Come back alive, Captain. That's an order. Yes, sir? The drive to Scottsdale took 40 minutes. Sarah went alone, driving a rental car, wearing a simple black dress that concealed the wire. She looked like any other businesswoman heading to a corporate dinner. The estate was massive, 10 acres of manicured grounds, a main house that looked like something from a magazine, heavy security at the gate. Sarah pulled up to the checkpoint and rolled down her window. The guard checked a clipboard. Name? Sarah Reeves. The guard's expression didn't change, but Sarah saw his hand move toward his radio. You're not on the list. I was invited. Check again. The guard spoke into his radio in low tones. A moment later, the gate opened. Proceed to the main house. Park in the Circle Drive. Sarah drove through, her heart hammering. She parked where indicated and got out. Another guard met her at the door. I need to check you for weapons. Sarah raised her arms and let him pat her down. He was thorough but missed the wire. The tech team had done good work. Inside, the house was elegant and cold. Marble floors, modern art. The kind of wealth that insulated people from consequences. The guard led her to a large study where 5 people were already gathered. Deputy Secretary Krantz was there, looking less polished than he had on TV. There was a woman Sarah didn't recognize, probably one of Vanguard's executives. 2 men in expensive suits who screamed defense contractor. And sitting at the head of the table, in a leather chair that might as well have been a throne, was the last person Sarah expected to see. Senator Thomas Blackwell, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, war hero, presidential candidate, the principal. Blackwell looked at Sarah with cold, calculating eyes. Captain Reeves, I've been wanting to meet you. Sarah's blood ran ice cold, but she forced herself to stay calm. Senator? Please sit. We have a lot to discuss. Sarah sat down across from him. In her ear, she could hear Torres's voice. We're recording everything. Stay calm. Blackwell poured himself a drink. You've caused me a considerable amount of trouble, Captain. Good. He smiled. I like your spirit. It's unfortunate we're on opposite sides of this. There are no sides. There's just right and wrong. How naive. Blackwell took a sip. Let me explain something to you. The operations you've exposed were necessary. They funded critical missions that kept America safe. Missions that couldn't go through official channels because of bureaucratic red tape and political cowardice. You killed American soldiers to cover up weapons trafficking. I eliminated security risks to protect operational integrity. There's a difference. Sarah's hands clenched under the table. You murdered my team. I gave an order to neutralize a threat. Your team saw something they shouldn't have. They asked questions that would have exposed years of carefully constructed operations. I did what was necessary. Blackwell leaned forward. And I'd do it again. In Sarah's ear, we've got him. That's confession to multiple murders. We're moving in. But Sarah wasn't done. How many others? She asked. How many other teams did you kill? Blackwell's smile widened. Enough to keep the machine running. Soldiers understand sacrifice, Captain. Sometimes that sacrifice is their lives. Sometimes it's their silence. And the money? The billions you've stolen? Redistributed to operations that actually matter. Unlike the bloated defense budget that gets wasted on congressional pet projects. Krantz shifted uncomfortably. Senator, perhaps we should... Shut up, Robert. Blackwell never took his eyes off Sarah. Here's what's going to happen, Captain. You're going to recant your story. Say you were mistaken, confused, suffering from PTSD. In exchange, I'll let you live. And if I refuse? Then you'll have an accident, tonight, very tragic, and all your evidence will be discredited as the ravings of a disturbed veteran. Blackwell stood up. It's your choice. Outside, Sarah could hear vehicles approaching. The FBI was closing in. Blackwell heard it too. His expression darkened. What did you do? Sarah stood up, ripping open her collar to show the wire. I got you on record confessing to murder, conspiracy, and treason, and the FBI just heard every word. The door burst open and federal agents flooded in, weapons drawn. Senator Thomas Blackwell, you're under arrest. Blackwell's face twisted with rage. He lunged toward Sarah, but agents tackled him before he got close. Krantz tried to run and made it exactly 3 steps before he was on the ground in handcuffs. The Vanguard executives didn't even resist. Torres appeared at Sarah's side. You okay? Sarah watched them drag Blackwell away, still shouting threats and denials. Yeah, I'm okay. You did good, Captain. Real good. But Sarah knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Because as they led Blackwell past her, he leaned in close and whispered, You think this ends with me? There are others, and they're already cleaning up loose ends. Then he was gone, dragged out into the night. Sarah stood in the empty study, surrounded by FBI agents processing the scene, and felt a chill run down her spine. Blackwell was right. Blackwell's whispered warning echoed in Sarah's head for the next 72 hours, while the FBI worked around the clock to dismantle what they were calling the largest defense corruption scandal in American history. Agents raided Vanguard offices in 6 states. Bank accounts were frozen. More arrests came daily. Mid-level contractors, Pentagon staffers, even 2 congressmen who'd taken money to look the other way. But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. She was sitting in an FBI safe house in Tempe when Torres walked in carrying a tablet and looking grim. "We have a problem," Torres said. Sarah set down her coffee. "What kind?" "The kind where people start dying." Torres pulled up a news article. "Patricia Morse was found dead in her apartment this morning. Apparent suicide." Sarah's stomach dropped. "That's not suicide." "Medical examiner agrees, but it was staged well enough that it'll take weeks to prove otherwise." Torres sat down. "She's not the only one. 3 more potential witnesses have died in the last 48 hours. Car accidents, home invasions. One guy had a heart attack at 32. Blackwell's cleanup crew. That's our theory, but he's in federal custody. No phone access, no visitors, except his lawyer. Then someone else is giving orders." Sarah stood up and started pacing, her ribs still aching, but the pain now manageable. "Blackwell said there were others, people higher up the chain." Torres pulled up another file. "We've been analyzing his communications. There's a pattern of encrypted messages to an unknown recipient. The tech team is trying to crack it, but whoever this is, they're good at covering their tracks." "How good?" "NSA good, maybe better." Sarah thought back to the meeting at the estate, to the way Blackwell had looked so confident even when surrounded by FBI agents, like he knew something they didn't. "He's got an insurance policy," Sarah said, "something that protects him even from inside a cell." "What kind of insurance?" "The kind that makes people untouchable." Sarah grabbed her phone. "I need to talk to General Carver." Carver arrived within the hour, looking haggard. The investigation had cleared him of any wrongdoing, but his military career was effectively over. Too many questions about judgment and protocol violations. "You look terrible," Sarah said when he walked in. "Right back at you, Captain." Carver sat down heavily. "Torres briefed me on the witness deaths. This is bad. It's about to get worse." Sarah pulled up Blackwell's political history on her laptop. "The senator is up for re-election next year. Before this scandal broke, he was polling at 60% approval. War hero. Reform candidate. The works. So he's spent 20 years building a political machine, campaign donors, media allies, people who owe him favors." Sarah highlighted several names, including the current Attorney General. Torres's eyes widened. "You think the AG is involved?" "I think Blackwell wouldn't have operated this brazenly unless he had protection at the highest levels." Sarah pulled up more files. "Look at the pattern. Every time someone got close to exposing Vanguard's operations, the investigation got shut down. Not by DOD, by Justice Department lawyers citing national security." Carver leaned forward. "The Attorney General was blocking investigations. Not just blocking, actively burying them." Sarah showed them a series of emails Patricia Morse had included in her files. Communications between Vanguard executives and someone identified only as the Shield. "I think the Shield is the Attorney General, and I think he's the one ordering the cleanup." Torres grabbed her phone. "I need to call my director." "And tell him what? That we suspect the nation's top law enforcement officer is a murderer?" Sarah shook her head. "We need proof. Solid, undeniable proof. How do we get that when everyone who could testify keeps dying?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she remembered something Mitchell had said back at the hospital, about people who operated in places that didn't officially exist. "We need to find Garrett," she said, "the man who interrogated me. He's Blackwell's fixer. If anyone knows where the bodies are buried, it's him." Torres pulled up Garrett's file. "We've been looking. He vanished the night of your arrest. No credit card activity, no phone pings, nothing. He's not gone. He's just hiding." Sarah studied Garrett's photo, the bland, forgettable face that could disappear into any crowd. "And he's probably still in Arizona." "Why Arizona?" "Because running makes you visible. The smart play is staying close, keeping tabs on the investigation." Sarah zoomed in on Garrett's known associates. He has a daughter, 17 years old, lives with her mother in Flagstaff. Carver frowned. You want to use his kid as bait? I want to watch her. If Garrett is the man I think he is, he won't be able to resist checking on her. Sarah looked at Torres. Can you put surveillance on the daughter without alerting anyone outside your team? Torres nodded slowly. I can try. But if Garrett figures out we're watching, then he runs and we're back to square one. Sarah closed the laptop. It's a risk, but it's the only play we have. The surveillance team set up that night, 2 agents in an unmarked van across from the ex-wife's house in Flagstaff. Another team monitoring the daughter's school. Sarah wanted to be there personally, but Torres refused. You're the star witness in a federal case, Torres said. You stay in protective custody. So Sarah waited. Watched the news reports about Blackwell's arraignment, where he pleaded not guilty, and his lawyer, a slick corporate type named Westfield, gave a statement calling the charges politically motivated. Carver sat with her in the safe house, both of them glued to the television. He's going to walk, Carver said quietly. Isn't he? Not if I can help it. Sarah, be realistic. He's got the best lawyers money can buy. Political connections. And with witnesses dying, the case is getting weaker by the day. Sarah turned to look at him. You giving up on me, General? Never. But I'm also not naive enough to think the system always works. Then we make it work. Before Carver could respond, Torres burst into the room. We got him. Garrett showed up at the daughter's school. Our team is tracking him now. Sarah was on her feet instantly. Where? He's heading south on I-17. Looks like he's going back to Phoenix. Torres grabbed her keys. I'm bringing him in. I'm coming with you. Sarah, that's not a request. They took 2 vehicles, Torres and Sarah in one, Carver and 2 agents in the backup car. The pursuit took an hour, following Garrett's car through Phoenix traffic while trying to stay invisible. Garrett finally pulled into a storage facility on the industrial side of town. Torres held back, watching from a distance as Garrett used a key to open Unit 247. What's he doing? Carver whispered from the back seat. Getting insurance, Sarah said. Whatever's in that unit, he thinks it'll protect him. They waited until Garrett emerged carrying a metal briefcase. Then Torres gave the signal and both vehicles moved in, boxing him in. Garrett saw them coming and ran. He made it maybe 20 feet before Sarah stepped out of the car and drew her weapon. Federal agent, get on the ground! Garrett froze, breathing hard, the briefcase clutched to his chest. For a moment, Sarah thought he might fight. Then he dropped to his knees, laughing. You're not a federal agent, Captain. You're a dead woman walking. Torres cuffed him while 2 agents secured the briefcase. Inside were documents, USB drives, and what looked like insurance policies, evidence Garrett had been collecting to protect himself. Smart man, Torres said, flipping through the files. Kept copies of everything just in case your bosses decided you were expendable. Garrett smiled coldly. I knew what I was getting into. Unlike your captain here, I understand how the game works. Sarah knelt down to his level. Then you understand you're done. Blackwell's in custody. Krantz is cooperating. And now we have your insurance files. You have nothing. Those files are encrypted. Good luck cracking them before the Attorney General shuts down your investigation. The AG can't shut down what he doesn't know about. Sarah stood up. And by the time he finds out, you'll already be testifying. Garrett's smile faltered. They brought him to a secure FBI facility. Not the main office, but a black site Torres' director used for high-value witnesses. No official record, no paper trail. In the interrogation room, Garrett sat across from Sarah, Torres, and a federal prosecutor named Helen Vance, who'd been read into the case. Here's your situation, Vance said, sliding a document across the table. We have enough evidence to charge you with 12 counts of murder, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and treason. You're looking at multiple life sentences, possibly death penalty. Garrett didn't even glance at the document. I want immunity. Not happening. Then I don't talk. Sarah leaned forward. You don't talk. You take the fall for everyone. Blackwell, the Attorney General, all of them. They'll paint you as a rogue operative who went off the rails, and you'll die in prison while they walk free. Garrett's jaw tightened. But if you cooperate, Vance continued, we can offer reduced charges. Take the death penalty off the table. Maybe even protective custody instead of general population. I need guarantees. You need to start talking before we decide you're not worth the trouble. Sarah pulled out a photo, her old team standing in front of the helicopter. These people died because you radioed their coordinates. You pulled the trigger, even if you weren't holding the gun. That makes you a murderer 12 times over. Garrett stared at the photo. For the first time, something that might have been regret flickered across his face. It wasn't personal, he said quietly. It was an operation. Tell that to their families. Garrett was silent for a long moment. Then he started talking. He confirmed everything Sarah suspected. Blackwell had been running the operation for 15 years, using his position on the Armed Services Committee to facilitate illegal weapons sales. The Attorney General, a man named Douglas Freeman, had provided legal cover, shutting down investigations and discrediting whistleblowers. Freeman's the real power, Garrett said. Blackwell's just the front man. Freeman has dirt on half of Washington. That's how he stayed untouchable. Where's the dirt? Torres asked. Safe deposit box, Bank of America, Scottsdale branch, box 1847. Garrett pulled out a key from his pocket. I kept a copy. Insurance. Vance grabbed the key. What's in the box? Everything Freeman's been collecting for 30 years. Photos, documents, recordings. Enough to destroy careers and end lives. Garrett looked at Sarah. You want to bring down the people at the top? That's how you do it. Torres and Vance left to get a warrant for the safe deposit box. Sarah stayed with Garrett, studying the man who'd helped kill her team. Why'd you do it? She asked. The money? At first. Then it became about survival. Once you're in, you can't get out. They own you. Garrett met her eyes. You think you won by exposing Blackwell. But there are others. There's always others. Then I'll expose them too. You can't fight the whole system. Watch me. The warrant came through in 6 hours. Torres and a team of agents raided the safe deposit box and found exactly what Garrett had described. Decades of blackmail material Freeman had accumulated as insurance. Photographs of senators with underage prostitutes. Financial records showing illegal campaign contributions. Recordings of conversations that would end careers and start criminal investigations. Freeman had weaponized corruption, and now it was all coming out. The Attorney General was arrested at his home in Georgetown at 4 a.m. The news broke before sunrise, and by noon, the entire country was watching the scandal unfold in real time. Senators resigned. CEOs stepped down. Federal judges recused themselves from cases. The web of corruption Blackwell and Freeman had built unraveled spectacularly and publicly. Sarah watched it happen from the FBI safe house, still healing from her injuries, still processing everything that had changed in the span of 2 weeks. Carver sat beside her as the news showed Freeman being led out of the Justice Department in handcuffs. You did it, he said quietly. You actually did it. We did it, Sarah corrected. Don't sell yourself short, Captain. This was your fight, your victory. Sarah thought about her team, about 4 years of hiding, about every moment she'd felt powerless and invisible. It doesn't feel like victory, she admitted. It just feels done. That's because the fight took everything you had. Carver turned off the TV. But now you get to decide what comes next. That's the real victory. 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in front of a congressional committee giving testimony about Vanguard's operations. The hearing room was packed. Reporters, politicians, families of soldiers who died in suspicious circumstances. Representative Margaret Cole, chairwoman of the committee, looked down at Sarah from the dais. Captain Reeves, in your estimation, how many service members died as a result of this conspiracy? Sarah had prepared for this question. She'd reviewed every case file, every incident report. At least 47 confirmed, possibly more. The full scope may never be known. And the government's response when you tried to report what you'd witnessed? They tried to kill me. When that failed, they tried to bury me. When that failed, they tried to discredit me. Sarah looked at the cameras broadcasting the hearing live. The system that was supposed to protect soldiers like me, instead, protected the people who murdered them. Cole nodded gravely. What would you say needs to change? Sarah had thought about this moment for 4 years. Accountability, real oversight of defense contractors, protection for whistleblowers that actually works, and consequences for people who abuse their power, regardless of how high up they are. The hearing lasted 6 hours. Sarah answered every question, provided every detail, relived every moment she'd spent running and hiding. When it was finally over, she walked out of the Capitol building and found a crowd waiting. Not protesters, not reporters, families. The families of her fallen team members. They'd been notified about the hearing, about what really happened to their loved ones, about how the government had lied to them for 4 years. A woman in her 60s approached Sarah with tears streaming down her face. "You're Captain Reeves." "Yes, ma'am. My son was on your team, Specialist Marcus Williams." The woman's voice broke. "They told me he died in a mechanical failure, that it was quick, painless." Sarah's throat tightened. She remembered Marcus, 23 years old, always making jokes to keep morale up. He'd died screaming when the helicopter exploded. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered. The woman grabbed Sarah's hands. "Don't apologize. You gave us the truth. After 4 years of lies, you gave us the truth. That's all we wanted." One by one, the other families approached, thanking her, crying with her, sharing memories of the people they'd lost. Sarah stayed until every family had spoken, until she'd heard every name, until she'd promised to honor their memory by making sure it never happened again. When the last family left, she found Carver waiting by his car. "You okay?" he asked. Sarah wiped her eyes. "Yeah, I am." "What now?" Sarah thought about the question. For 4 years, she'd been running from her past, hiding from who she used to be. But standing here, having faced down the people who'd tried to silence her, she realized something. She wasn't Captain Sarah Reeves anymore. And she wasn't the invisible nurse who'd hidden in plain sight. She was something new, something she got to define herself. "I'm going back to nursing," she said. "But not like before. I'm going to advocate for veterans. Help other people who've been failed by the system." Carver smiled. "That sounds perfect. What about you?" "I'm done with the military, but I've been talking to some people at Veterans Affairs. They want someone to overhaul their whistleblower protection programs." He shrugged. "Figured I might be qualified." "You're more than qualified, General." They stood in the fading afternoon light, two people who'd survived a system designed to destroy them. "You know what I realized?" Sarah said. "They thought making me invisible would make me powerless. But invisibility was my weapon. It let me see everything they were doing while they stopped seeing me as a threat. The quiet ones are always the most dangerous." Sarah smiled. "Damn right." 6 months later, Mercy Heights Hospital held a ceremony. The new trauma wing, funded by congressional appropriations and named after Sarah's fallen team, was being dedicated. Sarah stood at the podium wearing a suit instead of scrubs, her hair pulled back, her scars visible and unapologetic. The hospital director, a new one, the old director had resigned in disgrace, introduced her to applause. "I spent 4 years working in this hospital," Sarah began. "And most of that time I was invisible. People walked past me without seeing me, spoke over me like I wasn't there, treated me like I didn't matter." She paused, looking out at the crowd. Doctors, nurses, patients, press. But invisibility taught me something important. It taught me that the people society overlooks are often the strongest. The night shift nurses who save lives while everyone sleeps, the janitors who keep hospitals running, the soldiers who fight wars nobody wants to talk about. We're told to stay quiet, keep our heads down, don't make waves. And when we see something wrong, we're supposed to trust that someone else will fix it. Sarah's voice got stronger. But sometimes there is no one else. Sometimes you're the only one who sees the truth. And you have a choice: stay silent and safe, or speak up and risk everything. I chose to speak up, and it cost me 4 years of my life. It cost me my identity. It almost cost me my life. But it also gave me something back. It gave me my voice, my power, my purpose. Sarah looked at the banner hanging behind her, the names of her team members inscribed in gold letters. These people died because they saw something wrong and asked questions. They died because someone decided their lives were less important than profit, and they died believing nobody would ever know the truth. But I made sure people know. I made sure their deaths mattered, and I made sure the people who killed them faced consequences. The room was silent. So if you take anything from my story, take this. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. And the people who tell you to stay quiet, they're the ones who should be afraid. Because the invisible ones? We see everything, and we're done staying silent. The applause was deafening. After the ceremony, Sarah walked through the new trauma wing. The construction worker she'd saved, his name was Jake Porter, was there with his family. Captain Reeves! He approached with a huge smile. I wanted to thank you for saving my life and for everything you did after. Sarah shook his hand. How are you feeling? Good, really good. Back to work next month. Jake gestured to his wife and 2 kids. Because of you, they still have a husband and father. His wife hugged Sarah. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. It's more than enough, Sarah said. She walked outside into the Phoenix evening. The city lights were coming on. Somewhere, a helicopter flew overhead, not a military bird, just a news chopper covering traffic. Sarah watched it pass without flinching. Her phone buzzed. A text from Torres. Blackwell sentenced, 3 consecutive life terms, no possibility of parole. Freeman got the same. Thought you'd want to know. Sarah smiled and typed back, justice. She'd spent 4 years being nobody, being invisible, being scared. But she'd learned something in those years. Power didn't come from rank or title or recognition. It came from refusing to be silenced. It came from standing up, even when standing up meant standing alone. It came from believing your voice mattered, even when the whole world told you it didn't. Sarah Reeves, former combat medic, former invisible nurse, former ghost, stood in front of the hospital where she'd once been overlooked and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not victory, peace. Because she'd done what she set out to do. She'd honored her team. She'd exposed the truth. She'd held powerful people accountable. And she'd proven that the people society overlooks are often the ones who change everything. The night shift nurses were arriving for their shifts, walking past her without recognition. The janitors were starting their rounds. The invisible workers who kept the hospital running were taking their places. Sarah watched them and saw herself. The quiet ones. The overlooked ones. The ones who did the work nobody else wanted to do. And she knew that somewhere among them was another person who saw something wrong, another person who had a choice to make. Stay silent or speak up. She hoped they'd choose to speak, because the world needed more people willing to fight even when fighting seemed impossible. More people willing to stand up even when standing up meant standing alone. More people willing to be seen even when being invisible felt safer. Sarah walked away from Mercy Heights Hospital for the last time, not as a ghost, but as someone who'd proven that even the quietest voice could shake the foundations of power. And that sometimes the people everyone underestimates are exactly the ones who change the world.